Good morning. I am welcoming everybody both in person and live, I guess. And my name is Gabriela Murray, and I'm an associate professor of linguistics. Hello.
Hi.
Just in time, perfect timing. Anyways, I will be the host/MC for today's colloquium, the assessment day. And when I asked a friend what the difference is between a host and an MC, he said, not much. You should just crack some jokes if you are an MC, and the host is kind of boring. So I'll try to be in between a host and an MC. I guess MC is just a fancier word. Anyways, but he told me to keep them clean, so. All right, jokes apart, in the name of the college-wide assessment committee, I would like to thank you for joining us on this rather gloomy day and Friday the 13th. But hopefully we will learn more about our students' challenges and how to assess their progress or lack thereof during this crisis. The title of our colloquium is quite dramatic: assessment during a crisis, assessing student retention in a post-COVID era. And the topics actually that we will hear today originate from the results of the survey that the college-wide assessment committee carried out last semester. And the report was a retrospective assessment of pandemic-induced distance learning. And hopefully we will learn more and be able to discuss a lot of these issues that our students face. And we will learn some valuable and important information. But before we dive into these serious issues, I would like to welcome Provost and Senior Vice President Wong to give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Certainly on behalf of President Monroe, who unfortunately is at another meeting and can't make it here, and also on behalf of the Office of Academic Affairs, I want to welcome all of you to this colloquium about assessment. As we all know, part of our mission is about student success. And in order for us to make sure that our students achieve their academic goals and they get the skills that they need to enter the workforce and earn life-sustaining wages, which obviously has become very apparent the past 2 years with the pandemic, we want to make sure that everything that we are doing, both inside and outside of the classroom, is contributing to that student's success. So I applaud all of you on the great work that you're doing and what you're going to share with everybody in terms of helping the students to succeed. And I look forward to finding out about how you've assessed that they have, in fact, achieved what you hope that they have learned. So I hope there's going to be a very productive colloquium. We're going to learn a lot, share a lot, and hopefully walk away with a lot more to share with our students. So best of luck and a very successful colloquium.
Thank you, Provost. Well, I'm going to interject quickly before we get to the panel. I want to highlight to the college community that this assessment colloquium is a result of collaboration between the faculty-led academic assessment committee. And thank you for all the committee members and the hard work. And then the BMCC Office of Institutional, Vicky, help me.
There's me, Henry. IEA, which is the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Analytics.
Perfect. And this collaboration, you see, I've eaten all the good food in Cape Town. I'm forgetting anything about the US. But this collaboration, sometimes you don't get everything that you want. But we've worked in such a way that we put this particular colloquium together. And I mentioned with Dean Chris Schultz that this is not a one-off or an end result. The hope is, as Provost Wong mentioned, we wish to know and we hope that students learn what we want them to learn. And we're hoping that from today, we're going to launch in a lot more collaborative activity between the faculty side and the institutional effectiveness side to encourage that culture of assessment at BMC. And that I yield to the MC.
Okay, thank you very much. And this is, I think time-wise, we are actually perfect. Our first panel, I would like to introduce our first panel, and the title of the first panel discussion is Barriers to Students' Academic Progress. And it's a very interesting topic because it deals with the non-academic aspects of our students, how the non-academic issues impact our students. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lisa Rose, professor in the Department of Human Services. And online, I guess, Dr. Wladis, professor of mathematics, Sara Crosby, director of Learning Academy, and Dr. Robert Cortes from the Counseling Center. You are hearing, oh, okay, sorry. So would you like to sit in the
Sure.
center? Is that what you, because there is a clicker, so I think that we can.
Are we gonna go in the order that is, so who's going?
Oh, and also the moderator will be Vicky Sedeno, so I yield my. Thank you. And the time will be until 11 o'clock, so I guess we will have an hour and a half, and then questions and answers. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, this is on the fly, first time high flex presentation that I've ever made. So I'm glad to see you all, or for you to see me and to listen to some of my thoughts about, it's supposed to say my assessment odyssey, the clip notes, but for some reason that title is not showing up. So we'll move on.
Just use the arrow keys on the keyboard.
Okay. Not working.
Keep it first, maybe.
Ah, okay, all right. So here we go.
Actually, if you
Have
want
a
to
Louis
use this
Vuitton.
works now.
Okay, all right.
You want to stand and present? Or you want to sit and present?
I'm good here.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to unpack assessment for us because it's like not unpacking an overnight bag, but more like unpacking a steamer trunk. And I do hope that you'll all stay for Robin Iserla's keynote talk, where she really critically focuses on and contextualizes assessment sharply and deeply. Her book is absolutely wonderful, and I recommend it all at the cost of completion. So here, what I'm really going to just talk about now is what assessment means to me. Okay, and I'm going to begin this, and my colleague, Dr. Robert Cortes, will appreciate this because he too comes from a social work background, but my training is in social work. So I moved a long time ago from social work practitioner to community college assessment. And there are some really important qualities, I'm a community college professor, sorry. There are some important qualities and terms that I'm going to be using that really come from that social work training. Ecosystems assessment, the process of engagement, and the concept of cultivating independence. In clinical social work training, as well as in all of the methods of social work, we learn about assessment, sometimes referred to as the biopsychosocial assessment, or what I prefer to think of as the ecological assessment. In that, the social worker, human services worker, strives to understand the individual or the group or community within the context of that family, the community, and the social institutions that they impact and are impacted by. And then we filter this through what we call the strengths-based perspective, which significantly prompts the practitioner to view a client, group, and community in the context of their strengths rather than employing a deficit model. So here's a little schematic of this. I try to apply this in my teaching. It's not a perfect analogy by any stretch of the imagination, but I am continuously thinking and reflecting about how this group, this class, this group of individuals are experiencing this teaching, learning, and all of that in the complex context of their lived experiences, their past educational experiences, their work lives, their families, their economic situations, their experiences as students of color or from other countries, learning a second language. And also what I'm trying to do is try to figure out what I need to convey to them and what I'm hoping that they will come away with in this particular class. So all of this ecological assessment I'm doing within sort of the estate of the curriculum, what the intention is for these students to get in this class. And so there are some things that I try to think about, and what I hope for that they will get is a critical capacity for autonomous learning or independent learning, the creation of sustained engagement with the material and with one another, as well as the content of the class. So I'm doing all of this in what we call the here and now in social work. Think about that. While I'm consistently reflecting on how I'm being responded to and what more I should be doing, and how I am striving to authentically care and connect with each one of those individuals, either in the social work setting or hopefully how I translate it into the world of pedagogy, what we do. I'm trying to create these opportunities for developing these relationships. So I'm setting goals, I'm supporting the achievement of goals, I'm reevaluating, I'm attending to these immediate concerns, I'm reevaluating, resetting goals, I'm conferring with colleagues, I'm reading. This isn't done in isolation. So that's kind of what assessment means to me. And you're right, it's exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. Using assessment this way is holistic, it's continuous, it's iterative, it's incremental, it's formative, it's never ending. And I put this particular image up because so much of the time in the last few years, we've been doing all of this while we're sitting at our computers. Even in this room, there are people in this room, and I'm not connecting with them as I would. I'm connecting with some little squares that I see here, and trying to and I'm trying to figure out how does this work in this online environment. And a lot of that is, it's hard, you know, this is a question that haunts me. How do I do this here and now work that is incremental, that is reliant on these small changes? How do I do that in the online environment where so much energy is expended on pre-production of the course? And we all have to do that. We all create our PowerPoints. We all create our YouTube videos. We create our discussion boards. And to then figure out how to make these kinds of minor changes is very, very difficult and frustrating and maddening because we spent so much time beforehand creating what we think is the perfect course. But this process, it warrants this continuous self-reflection and reevaluation in order to make some changes. But in the end, I know that the tiniest shifts in what I can do, in what I do, can make the biggest changes. If I shift, say, from doing a quiz online to doing a quiz in my hybrid classroom, and then maybe deciding that not only am I going to give the quiz, but I'm going to give students the opportunity to actually confirm with one another about what did I get wrong, what did you get wrong, what did you think was the right answer. Let's talk about this some more. And then give them another chance to take that quiz. That can make a huge difference in what they take away, in what they learn, in their capacity to engage with one another, in their capacity to cultivate that independent learning, cultivate some leadership skills, all of that from that one little thing. So we don't get another crack at this. This isn't, some of you have seen Russian Doll or 50 First Dates or Groundhog Day or my new favorite book, The Midnight Library, where the protagonist gets infinite number of opportunities to change the present. We don't get that chance, but what we can do is strive to do these kinds of things so that we can make changes in the future for our students. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. That was amazing. I think that we all can agree how much work goes into understanding the student experience. I am going to allow for the folks in the audience to ask questions. If you prefer, you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. Anything that is standing out about this presentation would be welcomed and wonderful to discuss before we move on to our next speaker. One thing that was mentioned in the chat is the sense of creating a sense of community and shared goals. I did want to ask Dr. Rose about the engagement. What are the expectations for the student in the process?
First of all, I want to say that even though this is this high flex classroom, you know, my hope was that, boy, if I come to school today, I'll get some coffee at least, you know, like the old days. But I brought my own, thinking, nah, that's not gonna happen.
Absolutely.
Again, engagement in the classroom, engagement outside of the classroom is also very, very dynamic and frustrating to try to imagine, particularly in an online environment. We have these mechanical kind of mechanisms for it, to create breakout rooms, to create sort of forced opportunities for students to, on the discussion board, to talk to one another. But even that is difficult, because what I always tell my students is the discussion board is not a homework board. This is not where you submit written compositions. In order for there to be a discussion, it has to be dynamic. It has to be as though you were checking in on your Instagram account, or for us boomers, our Facebook accounts, or whatever kind of social media that they are engaged in. They are in the here and now, having a dynamic rather than static conversation. Most of us don't do that on the discussion board, because it's very, very difficult and time consuming to monitor. But I think those are the kinds of things. those are the kinds of activities and that we have to create those opportunities for students to really discuss. And sometimes you think of them on the fly. And so how to create those opportunities in an online class, again, where you've spent hours and hours in pre-production producing this, how do you do that if this particular class, it's not working? Because every single class, just like in social work, every single individual is different. Every single class is different. How can you be nimble enough to figure out how to make that happen in that particular class? So there's no there's no formula for this. It just means being there in the here and now and attending to those students.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had another comment in the chat saying context is so important. Obviously, faculty are thinking they're creating the perfect course, but context of students' lives is so impactful in the process. And that's a very, very good point made by Dr. Wladis. I think that, you know, this conversation is really important, and just understanding how the engagement process really informs our work with students, especially during the pandemic. Another member of our community mentioned the pandemic showed us the importance of flexibility. And of course, that is in all ways the most important currently in this time, and in response to us supporting our students throughout their work. Any other questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, you all know where to find me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that our next speaker now is going to be Dr. Claire Wladis, who's joined us from Berlin. Why don't we give her an opportunity to set up if she can? Thank you.
Hello.
Good morning.
I don't see a way to share my screen.
Sharing is open to everyone, so you should be able to just click on the green button.
Oh, there we go. I got it. Okay, can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for having me. Today I'm going to talk about time as a resource for college, how it is not equally distributed across, may explain different outcomes in college. So this is a basis of research we've been doing for a number of years at CUNY and at BMCC. So the results of our studies have shown that time as a resource for college is not equally distributed. For example, it varies by parental status. Parents, especially those with younger kids, have less time. Age, older students have less time. Online students, so for example, those who chose to take an online course prior to the pandemic have less time than those who did not. Gender, women have less time, and race ethnicity. So for example, Black and Hispanic students have the least time for college, and Asian Pacific Islander students have the most. So this obviously has equity implications. So I'm going to go through several graphs illustrating some of these trends. So just to explain a little bit how the graphs work to start out with, these graphs are showing the amount of what we call non-discretionary time commitments. So any paid or unpaid work that students did. The basic idea is this is time that students do not have that they can spend on college. So the taller the bar is, the less time that particular group has for college. So parents with preschool age kids averaged 86 fewer hours per week for college than students with older or no kids. Students who chose to enroll in at least one online course pre-pandemic averaged 19 fewer hours per week for college than students who did. Women averaged 11 fewer hours per week for college. And there were large and significant differences in time available for college based on race and ethnicity. So for example, Black students averaged 20 fewer hours per week for college compared to Asian Pacific Islander students. So why do these discrepancies exist and why are they so large? Well, there are a number of factors. So one of them is childcare and other forms of caretaking. So this is obviously the biggest factor for students, but it's also a significant factor for other groups. For example, Black and Hispanic students and online students are all more likely to have children. It's also a factor for gender because women and men, when they have children, women are more likely to spend significantly more time on childcare. Paid work is also a factor. So research has shown that financial aid does not reflect the realities of most low-income students who often have to contribute financially to their families on top of paying tuition. At CUNY, about 78% of students who work for pay do so to pay for living expenses. So work is largely out of financial necessity. The amount of time for college is also correlated with age. So for every additional year of age, time for college goes down by about 1.5 hours per week. This explains some of the trends we saw for different groups. For example, at CUNY, Black students tend to enroll at older ages than other races and ethnicities, which means they are likely to have less time for college because of work and family commitments. But on the other hand, it also masks certain inequities. For example, Hispanic students tend to be younger than white students at CUNY. However, they actually tend to have more time poverty for students of the same age. Time poverty is also significantly related to college outcomes. So for example, if we look at students who are retained versus not retained in college at CUNY, students who were retained in college averaged 10 more hours per week available for college than students who were not retained. And for every additional credit that a student earned, they on average had 2 more hours per week available for college. We can also see that it explains some of the discrepancies between different groups and outcomes. So inequitable distribution of time available for college directly explain discrepancies in college retention and credit accumulation. So we ran mediation models at CUNY, and they revealed that the number of hours per week that a student had available for college explained 65% of the difference in retention and 100% of the difference in credit accumulation for parents versus non-parents. It explained 8% of differences in retention and 98% of differences in credit accumulation for those students who took some courses online versus those that took none pre-pandemic. It explained 100% of the difference in retention and credit accumulation by gender. And it explained about 1/4 to 1/3 of the difference in retention and about 1/3 to 1/2 of the difference in credit accumulation by race and ethnicity. So while time poverty does not explain all of the differences by these groups, I don't know exactly when it froze because I didn't hear anything saying it was frozen. So I don't know if it froze on this page or not. So I guess I can briefly summarize this again and then move on. So mediation models showed that the number of hours per week that student had available for college explained differences for all of these different groups in terms of their retention and credit accumulation. And it was a really significant factor in explaining differences. Obviously not the only one, but clearly a significant and understudied factor. So in particular, we found that time poverty also likely leads to other negative outcomes. So for example, students with the highest levels of time poverty often sacrificed more of their free time to try to make up the gap. For example, Black and Hispanic women had 22 to 24 hours per week less time available for college compared to Asian men, but they still spent roughly the same number of hours on their education at the cost of their free time. Similar patterns held for other time poor groups. And this sacrifice of free time also has costs. It means less time for healthcare, sleep, exercise, leisure, etc. And less time spent on these activities is linked with lower cognitive performance, as well as higher stress and negative health outcomes in the research literature. So what can we do to address these specific time inequities? So many of these are systemic and need federal and state action. However, BMCC as an institution and we as individuals can advocate for example, an improved financial aid system that includes family and living expenses and accurate childcare costs and student need, that actually provides all students with enough aid to cover their need. Currently, only about 70% of students nationally have unmet need. Provides enough aid to allow students to attend college right after high school instead of delaying enrollment, which increases the chances that they'll have time poverty when they enroll. That stops tying resources to full-time enrollment or number of credits, which penalizes more time poor students. And that removes financial aid penalties for students who need more semesters to finish their degree, which are often more time poor students. We can also advocate to increase on-campus childcare to address student need. Currently, nationally, it covers only about 5% of student need. What can we do locally at BMCC to address these issues? Well, we can consider individual student time resources before advising students to enroll in more credits. Taking more credits may be good advice, for example, for students with more time, but it's bad advice for students who have little time for college. And in fact, the original research in academic momentum showed that students who were working full-time didn't have better outcomes when they took more classes. We can provide advising and resources targeted specifically at time poverty. For example, we can connect students with financial resources that may allow them to work less. We can connect them with free or low-cost childcare options were available. We can connect them to elder care and disability resources that might help them find supports for caretaking responsibilities. We can also reflect on how we can create more flexible policies that reflect student realities. For example, we can continue to provide online advising and other administrative services online post-pandemic. We can ensure that all students who want to take online asynchronous courses have access to them. And we can ask ourselves, what programs or policies increase time flexibility? For example, in other countries like Canada, they provide accommodations not just for those with disabilities, but also for those with caretaking responsibilities. For example, we could model certain internal policies on some of those policies that exist in other countries. How can we design more innovative programs, policies, and structures to support students with time poverty? Well, we can ask students, Most of us do not have the same experiences as our students. So instead of telling students what to do, we probably need to ask them what they need, and we need to act on what they tell us by designing interventions, policy changes around what students tell us they need. What can we as individuals do at BMCC to support students with time poverty? Well, we can reflect on our own policies and course structures. For example, during the pandemic, most of us were more lenient and flexible because we recognize the severity of this external factor on our students' lives. But students who suffer from time poverty are being significantly negatively impacted by systemic ongoing external factors, which may have as much or more an impact in the pandemic. How can we accommodate them moving forward? But this is more than just about policies and structures. We need to ask ourselves, how do our implicit biases impact the messages we send students and the way that we treat marginalized time poor students? For example, time in higher education tends to be viewed as an individual resource free of constraint, but this does not reflect reality for our students. 78% of CUNY students who work do so to pay for living expenses. 61% of CUNY student parents did not agree that the childcare available to them provided them enough time for their schoolwork. A culture which suggests that college should come first ignores the critical importance of health issues. In our research, we found a high prevalence of student and family serious health issues at BMCC, even before COVID. Family commitments, childcare and elder care can't simply be sacrificed for college. Financial realities, most students have to work to pay for basic living expenses, so work cannot be sacrificed for college. For many of our students, college can't come first, but this does not diminish its importance. But what it does mean is that we need to change our conception of college students' time. For example, when we talk to students who have severe time poverty about how they can improve their time management, this can be stigmatizing and ineffective. They cannot manage what they do not have. Just as blaming students for financial poverty, a result of systemic social structures, is inappropriate, blaming students for time poverty is also inappropriate. These are deficit approaches which blame marginalized groups for systemic inequities. We often do this unconsciously and unintentionally through our spoken written speech and through our course and college structures and policies. Students often blame themselves in addition for their time poverty. Instead of blaming them further, how can we help them to shed their own self-blame? The most time-poor students in our studies are already sacrificing a much greater proportion of their free time on college than their time-rich peers. So working harder is neither an option nor the solution. We often fail to recognize how hard our students are already working. So what messages do we, as a society, as an institution, or as individuals, send students about whether they belong in college and whether their time challenges are legitimate? How often are students sent the message that work or family commitments don't belong in college? For example, how are college students depicted or described on college websites and other materials? To what extent are students prohibited from bringing children on campus? How do we respond to children or other family present during Zoom classes? Do our policies restrict access to asynchronous online courses, which are often selected by time-poor students with work-family commitments as a way to access time flexibility? When a student misses class, an assignment, or does not spend enough time on an academic task to do well, what do we assume about them? Do we assume that they don't care, that they're lazy? Or are we willing to consider that time poverty might be a factor in some of these cases? When students need accommodation because of work or family commitments, do they feel it is acceptable for them to speak up? For example, what do our policies say about which excuses are acceptable? Do we only list illness and death in the family, or do we also list other factors that might be related to work and family commitments? When students do speak up, how often do we view their requests for accommodation as legitimate? For example, do we treat work and family commitments differently than other factors outside of students' control, such as illness? So I'll wind up with just one final thought. Making practical changes to structures and policies, like advocating for them on a larger scale or changing them locally, is critical for equity. But even when we cannot help time-poor students in a practical way, for example, we cannot simply raise their grade or give them credits if they don't have time to do work, and we can't change federal policy. We can always try to respond in a way that legitimizes their experience and removes stigma and individual blame for their time poverty. So I'll just wind up here with one final question, which is, what else could we do differently to serve time-poor students more equitably? Any thoughts or questions? Of course, I'd love to hear any of them now, but also you can also feel free to email me at any time at my BMCC email address. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wladis. Sorry for all of the interruptions. This was really wonderful because it gives us an idea of what one area that isn't always highlighted. Time poverty is something that we don't often talk about. I think we can move on to Ms. Sara Crosby, Director of the BMCC Learning Academy, and then we can return and circle back to Dr. Wladis.
I was loving that though.
Weren't we? It was really great to see such a big picture of our student population, and especially the student populations that we serve so significantly. But I will then defer for you to go ahead and share your wonderful work.
I'm so sad. That was like, I'm speaking for everybody. Like that is so validating, that those few slides that we saw, so validating for our students, I feel like. Okay, sorry. Okay. Well, anyway, so I'm Sara. I'm the director of the BMCC Learning Academy. Before I share my slides, I would like to do just like a slight bio background context for you all. I got my start at City Tech teaching developmental writing and working for an educational research grant funded program that studied self-regulated learning. So, and then before that, I got an MFA, which stands for fine art. So I have a really confusing background, but one pattern is that everything is iterative for me. So I make a plan and I figure out how I'm going to do it, and then I implement the plan, and then I retweak. So everything that I have done at CUNY has kind of followed that process. So I'm about to talk to you about the Learning Academy and one particular sort of structure that we have at the Learning Academy. But keep that in mind, that we're constantly on a cycle of retweaking what we're doing. Okay, so I'll share my screen. We'll look at some slides. Okay, y'all can see my screen. Let me tweak this a little bit, make it bigger for you. And let me, hang on. Oops. Okay. So you can see my screen, I assume? Okay. So today I'm going to talk about deliberate structures, which for those of you who know about the Learning Academy, we are just we're just finishing a 5-year Title V grant that was basically designed to help us figure out what structures will help students with retention and graduation. The Learning Academy, those structures from the very beginning have been small caseload advisement. The maximum caseload that our advisors have is 125, which is small, might sound large, but that's small. We have success seminars, which I'm going to talk more about, peer mentoring. We have various forms of learning communities. And then we have a real focus on transfer and career experiences. So before the pandemic, we had 8 different success seminars, and I'm going to unpack what's up with these seminars in a couple of slides. But our premise for the seminars has always sort of been that this is a structure where students can have regular source of compassion, community. It's a place for them to find navigation at BMCC, because BMCC pre and post pandemic is hard to navigate if you're a student or other people. We definitely do a lot of work on fostering a sense of belonging. We want students to feel like they actually have helped us build our community. We haven't built it for them, they helped us build it. They belong there. They are what our community is all about. We help them connect to campus, and the biggest piece of that is really learning about resources, but also learning about how to understand and connect with and engage with faculty, because our students, it's not like a natural thing for them, and faculty are an amazing resource. So if we can kind of help them feel comfortable fostering those relationships, that's a big deal for us. And then again, I'm going to talk more about this when I talk about the seminars. Everything that the seminars do it's a placeholder space for practicing strategies and building skills, both academic and more career related. Okay, so the pandemic basically helped us understand that we were on the right track with our seminars. It's just that the pandemic kind of validated some things and then helped us make our seminars even better. So specifically, we started understanding that students really do need this deliberate structure during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic. And the seminars are that. And I have the particulars on the next slide, but they are part of our culture. Everybody does it. You take a seminar each semester that you're with us until you graduate. So there's a deliberateness there that isn't like standalone workshops. It's not like a workshop series. It's just part of our culture. So no matter which seminar they're taking, they know it's the same structure, it's the same feeling, and they can count on that each semester. It's also, it's a low stakes environment for them. So being in the classroom is like where we want them to thrive, but sometimes it's nice for them to have a place each week where they can come, and there is no power structure. There is no sort of, like making you feel like you're in a classroom and you have and pressures to learn things and perform. We don't have that. So it's a good place to engage in a low stakes way. We also are responsive to what students tell us that they want as we've built seminars. So like I said, we have 8 different seminars, and 4 of them are created based on what students have told us that they want. And then this last one is the real like home run. We used to do in person, and then we would have several asynchronous versions of our seminars. And what the pandemic has helped us understand is that students need the flexibility. So they need maybe in person, but they probably just need synchronous online, because this is just a seminar, it's not a class. So they need as much flexibility as they can. So we're going to probably stick with predominantly synchronous online seminars, just to help students have that added sort of element of flexibility. Okay, so then this just, if I don't know, this is maybe boring, but so to understand.
I'm so sorry, Sarah, just very quickly, I just want to interject. Unfortunately, Dr. Wladis had some technical issues, and she's going to have to leave, but I'm sure that she will be able to share those slides with us so that we can share them with the group today. Unfortunately, just wanted to let everyone know.
I'm sorry, is it possible for her, I'm so sorry, Sarah, is it possible for her to just finish up, from the point that she had stopped, because she is available to do that, and then come right back to this? I'm sorry for
Sarah, it's up to you, Sarah.
I mean, I only have like 2 more slides. Would you, whatever you guys want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll just knock this out. Because I too want to get back to her presentation. Okay, so just to understand like the particulars of our success seminars, they're 12 weeks, they're 50 minutes each week. They're message courses, meaning they are 0 credits, and they appear in the CUNY first schedule. So we register students for these. So that is a nice thing. It helps them take it seriously. And it's also, again, part of that culture of creating something very deliberate. They're led by the Learning Academy advisors. They all have curriculum that go with them. So there are learning objectives, there's syllabi, lesson plans, weekly materials. There's a Blackboard shell for each. And we have ongoing training. Again, like I said, like everything we do, we plan something, and then usually in June, we retweak based on our pre-post surveys and feedback that we've gotten from students over the semesters. Students who have high participation get co-curricular transcript credit, and then they also get a micro grant, which is very micro. We do have pre-post surveys that we do. We don't do it in all 8 each semester, because that would be a little bit crazy for us. But each semester we do about 2 or 3 pre-post surveys. And those are very helpful. I can drop it in the chat if anybody wants to look at a sample. This just gives you a list of our seminar menu. So these are each of our seminars, and it tells you sort of like get the idea of like what this looks like in a student's course schedule. The Design Your Own Success is obviously for first year, and then the Graduate Advantage, those are our graduating students who are going to be transferring the next semester. So it's all about survival at the 4-year. And then this is just a teeny bit of data based on students who have gotten co-curricular transcript credit for participating in 10 out of 12 sessions. So it's not super high, but also if you think about 10 out of 12 is a pretty actually heavy lift for students in terms of attendance for a class that is no credit. So we haven't hit 50% yet, but we're the highest I think we've gotten is 47%. So we take that as like an encouraging measure for what we're doing. I'm gonna stop sharing and get off the stage.
Actually, that's actually very good to sort of see from a support services how our student populations that are non-traditional can sort of find a menu of supports that would help them. And then we can go back to Dr. Wladis' presentation to see the disaggregation of our students, but it's very important. Does anyone have questions? We'd like to open it up just if you have thoughts outside of the chat, and we can just cover the chat after.
I have a question. Or should I raise my hand?
No, please go right ahead.
So as far as the data collection, and you may have went through this, but I'm just out of curiosity, what was the survey population? Was it like first-time freshmen or transfer students? And what sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. It was a mix. So I was kind of summarizing from several different studies very quickly. I would say most of the data was drawn from a population across CUNY. So it was a wide range. It was fairly representative. And then there was some of the data was taken from studies we did specifically at BMCC.
Okay, because that would lead to my next question. I think you pretty much asked it. I was going to ask the period of when was the survey done and the response rate. That's all.
Yeah, most of this data collection was pre-COVID. So we've done ongoing work since then, but I didn't really report much on some of that because we're still analyzing it. The response rate was, I think, about 20%, if I recall correctly.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
We have another question, Mindy Shapiro.
This is partly a comment and also a question. I teach a Sunday course, and in teaching a Sunday course, the reality of it is these students are working full time. Most of the students in my class not only are working full time during the week, but they have children at home. So one of the things that I did with my in-person Sunday class was I turned it into a hybrid class. We had Zoom going the whole time, because if you think about it, for students, traveling on Sunday is difficult. Public transportation does not work as well. Some of them were spending an additional 3 hours just to get back and forth to the school. So the importance of providing online for these students, it saves them 3 hours that they don't have. One of the things that I always try to do with them is if their children are there, if they're working, dealing with their children, that's fine with me. In a Zoom session, you can do that. On campus, you're not allowed to do that. So, there are so many things we need to do. And as a person who teaches on the weekend, I know what my students' time constraints are. That's why they're there on the weekend. So thank you. This was an amazing presentation. And I think you were having difficulty, but I actually did say what you said in your presentation. We actually talked about in the chat earlier, the idea that we need to move away from a deficit model. We need to talk about time poverty, not time management. And we actually had that conversation while you were having difficulties. Thank you. It was an amazing presentation.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your comment.
Just one last question. The presentation on
I have a question too. Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question for Sara. And I have to admit, I didn't know about these seminars by the Learning Academy. And if you mentioned that in the talk, I apologize, maybe I didn't catch it, but how do you decide which topics to include in these 12-week, 50-minute workshops? Are they student driven, or does it change from semester to semester based on the situation, whether the student takes online, hybrid, or in-person classes. Could you just, maybe you mentioned it, I just maybe didn't catch it.
Yeah, no problem. So there are 8 different curricula, and they're all, so like Study Smart is all about study skills, managing our time, but also about mindset. We do some mindfulness stuff just to sort of like understand how to be a student, but also like deal with the strain of being a student. So because we know that students don't just need, for that particular seminar, we know that they don't just need to be told about strategies, like study strategies, you know what I mean? Like we actually need them to have a safe place to come every week and try a strategy, but also try a mindfulness activity and have a place where they can talk about other things that are related to their academics and related to studying, like using feedback. How do you digest feedback? How do you keep that impulse to ignore feedback, at bay? How do you see feedback as sort of information instead of a personal sort of stab? So to answer your question, they each has a very specific topic. So we do our learning objectives once we have our topic, and then each week there's a breakdown of that topic. So it kind of depends. It's very student driven. So we have 2 different seminars that talk about transfer. There's one just exploring transfer and understanding the basics of like a good fit next step in terms of your education. And then there's the one that they take in their last semester, which, sorry, I have feedback, which is really about like preparing to be a transfer student. And they need both of those. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Well, that's really great. Thank you, Sara, for sort of piggyback on that. Any other questions for Dr. Wladis? I know that we want to make sure we get to her. If I think people asked in the chat about sharing the slides. I don't know if you are able to. She'd be happy to share that with Rebecca.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think as we aim to understand community college students as a specific population, as a special population, it's really important to the fact that you're using the term poverty, time poverty. We talk about SES, we talk about income, but we don't delineate and disaggregate all the spillover effects that living in poverty or close to poverty or being first generation, et cetera, has. And so I really hope, especially regarding assessment, that these kinds of constructs like time poverty, and there may be other pieces to that, like what Sara is talking about, and this is going to come up in Robin's book. It's very prevalent in Robin's book, that Robin coined the term student sensibility, which it seems like the Sara's program is addressing that by sort of making explicit things that students don't just have coming into college. But I really appreciate also having this rigorous research looking at those constructs, because we need to get that, I feel like, more into the policy narrative.
That's the point I'm assuming is of evidence-based research, right? To inform based on evidence. Great point, Rebecca. Thank you. And Dr. Wladis, again, we appreciate your time in the interruptions, all included. I know we have another question in the chat, and this comes from Professor Rannis. This one is for Sara. They ask, how successful are seminars in fostering student-to-student engagement connections?
So I'm going to answer that anecdotally. So I teach 3 of these. I teach 2 sections of the professional writing workshop, and I teach 1 section of the graduate advantage. And we just had our last sessions this week. And my experience, I think, is the same that all advisors have with these seminars. These students, we open up the session with what's what do you want to high five each other about? What do you want to kind of vent about? And about week 3, they kind of are off and running on their own. I mean, they might have questions that I can kind of help them navigate, but they're usually talking about, so, you know, like mid-semester tests or homework assignments, or, you know, one of them was like, my boyfriend just broke up with me, and we talked about that. You know, it's just like they can say anything. And we'll kind of navigate through it as our warm up. We do that for 5 minutes. And I think it gives them a comfort level with just interacting with each other. And then they swap information. Like they swap information the whole time. I mean, you know how students do. And it's fun, you know, and they support each other in the chat, and they just, you know, they're like, well, I heard, or have you tried this, or did you know about? And, you know, one time, and then I'll stop. One time I was doing professional writing, and I had Aaron here and I had Carol over here, and they joined from campus, right? And then they both went off, they muted their cameras, and then they were sitting side by side because they'd found each other in Fitterman or wherever they were. And then they just like joined in together. It was hilarious. So, you know, it's nice. It's low stakes. It's like deliberate. It's, you know.
What that I have to say, that's one sense of building a community in the non-traditional spaces, right? Absolutely. I think that's great. Any other questions? I think we want to move on to our last speaker, and we're doing good on time, but we want to make sure we have enough time for everyone to present, and any other questions can always be responded to. Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Wladis, and thank you, Sara, for both presenting really wonderful perspectives on the student experience and creating this community for the non-traditional. And the evidence was really, it demonstrated a very holistic picture. I'm going to go to our last speaker, Robert Cortes, Dr. Robert Cortes. He is the Associate Director of Outreach in the BMCC Counseling Center. Robert.
Hello, good morning. This way, yeah, got it. Where am I looking? Is that where the camera's at? Can you all see me? All right, cool. Can I see myself? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Is that me? Where am I?
The camera, keep talking to the camera.
All right, hey, I want to cater to my colleagues in the room as well. So this is one of the challenges of hybrid. As we see, it's easy to lose both audiences. So I see you on Zoom, I see my colleagues in the room, and I'm super excited to be here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a counselor in the Counseling Center, and I also am a new manager for a program called GAMES, which is a partnership with Academic Advisement and the Learning Resource Center and the Counseling Center. And we serve students on academic probation. So as we talk about challenges, this semester we looked at that with the support of the President's Fund. We looked at that population, right? And we're talking to them and meeting with them. But prior to that, we also did a lot of work. I did a lot of work, my colleagues did behind the scenes to really talk to students. So the prior presentations have been amazing, wonderful. I'm not offering you solutions today. I'm going to tell you that straight up. In my work, oftentimes there are no immediate solutions. As a counselor, I can't offer you a house when you come in telling me you're homeless. I cannot offer you money to come up with your, to work less hours, right? So my job is to help you stay in the mess often, all right? When we think about assessment, I'm more of a qualitative researcher in that my job today is to bring you the lived experiences and the voices of our students, not students in research that have been done in other institutions, our students, the voices of our students that I got from sending text messages to them in fall of 2021. And my text message said, hey, this is Cortes from the Counseling Center, reaching out to students on academic probation. Would you mind sharing what some of your challenges were over the past semester? And I will share with you what I got, because I think that it's one thing to think about these things from a statistical quantitative perspective. It's also another thing to think of it in general terms, right? But it's different when you hear it in their words that I copied and pasted onto an Excel from their text messages. So this is not formal, it's sort of anecdotal, but it's authentic and genuine. And I took this picture this morning as I was walking onto campus. For those who've walked past that school, can you see what's missing in the fog? Yeah, it's Freedom Tower. It's right behind there.
Oh, yeah.
So the question is, right, what is there that sometimes seems like it's missing, right? It's there. Tomorrow you'll see it when it's a sunny day. You're like, oh, I didn't even realize where that was, right? So again, think about this. So first things first, let's keep it pushing, right? Peace out. All right, so using a contextual lens, right? First and foremost, where are we now? Where have we been? What have we gone through? The idea is collective trauma. Why do I say collective trauma? Because we are not aliens, Martians, robots who were in a spaceship watching COVID happen to the world. We were in it. I share often, you all know my story, it's all over the place. I lost my father March 26, 2020, 3 days, no funeral, no wake, no hospital visit, and I still had to show up at work and support students. 2 years later, I could talk about it without shedding tears immediately, but this is life, right? Sure, someone could do a study on me as a doctoral student at the time in my 4th year, trying to persevere and do my research. And that will be written up in some summary, and 3 years later, we'll forget. That experience will never be forgotten for me as I lived through it, right? And so again, lived experiences. COVID pandemic stress, at the same time, we know our students are, come from many different ethnicities and races, and there was so much race-based traumatic stress going on with all of the attacks happening on Black and brown people, all right? So again, context. Where were we over the past couple of years? Where have we been? All right. So just some quick recap for you to remember. Signs of health pandemic stress. These are things that we all went through and our students went through as well. I'm not going to cover all of them in the interest of time. But right, fear and worry about your health. This is kind of what we all went through, right? Changes in sleep or eating, worsening of mental health conditions. If you already had health problems, they got worse. No surprise, no secret. Flip this around to the other increased use of substances, perhaps. And we were home as well, so that could have gotten worse if you were in your home environment, had access to those things all day, right? Flip this to race-based traumatic stress, right? These are some things that we know resembles post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Can lead to low self-esteem, right? Causes you to mentally distance yourself from the traumatic events. You might find yourself more hypervigilant, right? More depression and anger, and recurring thoughts of the event. So again, this is just the context of where we were, okay? Physical reactions, you might react. So these might be some of the things you saw in your circles. We all work at different parts of the college. So everywhere from, on Zooms to your classrooms, to learning cohorts, to people accessing tutoring services, to people accessing counseling services. These things may or may not have affected our students to seek those resources during this time period. So what did students experience? Well, these are most of the things I got back from my text messages. Loss of loved ones, right? Adjustment to technology in their home environment. Maybe there were relationship issues, things that not just about having trouble connecting to Wi-Fi, right? But also I have to be around my kids all day. I have 2 small children, 5 and 3, who were with me through that whole time period I just described, climbing all over me during meetings with cabinet, and me having to first apologize and then think, I should never apologize for my children. So let me, cradle my son, and I would do the same if I was home presenting right now and talk to you. So these kinds of things, right? Physical health issues, increasing responsibility, much of what's been covered before. So these are no surprises. But again, these are the general terms. I want to give you the flavor. I want you to hear from our students. So in their voices, right? So this student, this was their these are all text message responses that they sent me. They look like paragraphs. They look like they wrote me essays. They put these in text messages. Hello, Mr. Cortes. I have so much going on at home. I have a newborn. My mother is currently really sick. Well, she's been sick a couple of years now. She's in her last stage of cancer, and I don't know how long she has to live. School is something, my mind right now can't focus on school, right? This was my second chance and I blew it, but I just can't do it. School is something I'm not focusing on right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like what? You didn't have to apologize. This is your life, but the student still cares enough to apologize for their own experience. These are things that we miss if we're not paying attention. That's why I included it. Okay, another student. I had to get a job because my family store couldn't pay their employee what they used to pay them. So they had to let him go. And I worked 8 to 12 hours for a little pay so they wouldn't close down. Then I had a family member, my only grandparent left, get affected by Corona and passed away. So both those factors took a toll on me. I was exhausted and didn't have time after work. 8 to 12 hours, 7 days, just to clarify, and sometimes up to 16. And last semester, I had to go back to my country for family issues, and I had to leave 1/4 of the way through this semester. Where's the immediate solutions? It's a joke, possible, right? Let's go, it gets better. Challenges I had were me being a witness and bystander to my girlfriend's brother getting hit with a car and then watching my girlfriend get arrested for trying to help her brother. It put me in a closed-minded state, and my mother had COVID around that time as well, so I had to take care of her. But I'm ready now to continue and strive forward with these classes, Mr. Cortes. Right? Amazing. Fall 2020 being my first semester was not easy for me coming into BMCC in the middle of a pandemic. I didn't have a good understanding of how to work Blackboard or any knowledge of resources offered to me and how to access them. For example, the library. And I'm still not sure how to log on and use it online. I was home with very limited working space, and with everyone in my home working remotely, it was difficult to attend class with stable connection. Almost losing my mother to COVID-19 caused me to regress my anxiety, which made me overthink and get distracted and not complete assignments. Seeing my mother in this condition made me relive the memories of my father's passing. I was so afraid to lose my mother, I concentrated more on taking care of her than my assignments. In other words, it was multiple factors that intervened. Who wouldn't focus on caring for their mother rather than writing an assignment for a class? This is logical, people, right? Not a surprise. Oh, this is a long one. I almost couldn't decide how to put this one on the screen. Challenges this year, they put this in bullets in a text message to me. 1, my mother's on dialysis, has cancer, spina bifida, and kidney failure. 2, I work 2 jobs Monday to Friday. Here's my hours: para 8 to 2 p.m. and a group leader from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. That's why I schedule my classes this semester on the weekends, maybe on Sunday, like one of the professors shared earlier in the conversation. Also this year, 2021, I lost my baby cousin and my aunt during my first semester. So this was a student who never came to us before. My classes were virtual. Classes like music was hard and difficult because trying to learn hands-on material through a computer was impossible. I failed that class, and this caused me to be on academic probation. My mother was hospitalized for 3 days, happens, right? So I missed only 3 days of class this semester. The professor knew this, but I was given a failing grade for the whole semester for that class. So even if I did all homework and class assignments that was given for the rest of the 3 to 4 months, it wouldn't matter because I missed only 3 classes in the beginning of the semester. Nothing against the professor, but sometimes we are the challenge. Sometimes, not always, sometimes. So don't know what happened there, but it was important to this student, right? That's what matters. It's important to these students. As a qualitative researcher, our goal is not to search the truth. It's to understand the lived experiences of the students that we serve, of the people that are in front of us. Full disclosure, I was on academic probation when I went to college, right? And I went to Regis High School, which was a prestigious high school. I was supposed to go to some big name university, and I didn't. I went to SUNY, 6 hours away, and almost got kicked out. And transferred to Hunter, full disclosure. But while I was there, I was washing dishes very unhappily for $4 an hour and didn't care about school. But that's another conversation. But again, I speak to you as someone who's been through this and recently just defended my dissertation on March 21st. That's why everybody's calling me doctor. Thank you. I'm just Robert. So again, the experiences, we have to remember where we came from, who we are, and how they stay with us, and who our students are. Unfortunately, number 6, the student said this is the first college that I ever heard that will drop students very fast without giving them time to catch up, and this is my first year. So I've been pushing myself because I don't want to be dropped from the program, but sadly it hasn't been working. So I kept that in there because we have to own where we fall short sometimes as an institution. It's not about saying, oh, students come with these things, these deficits, right? What are we as an institution doing to meet their needs? And individually, what are we doing to meet their needs, right? All right, a couple more slides. This one was another difficult one, so I only have 2 more. My grades suffered due to stress of COVID, the death of friends and family, and doing my best to be a good husband to my wife and make sure that I give her the time, love, and affection she deserves while I pursue my education. I was like, wait, did I write that? I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I almost shed a tear as I read that. Right? It's home, right? In addition, I just became a new father in September 2020. Furthermore, living in a shelter and the protests surrounding racial discrimination created an environment that contributed to my mental stress. Also, these are written by our students. Look at the writing talent and skills involved in this paragraph, right? Overall, my relationship with the remaining of my family, my mental health, and my understanding of the economic and societal effects from COVID and other community fairs has improved. If I was to know what I know now, I would tell my old self to reach out to my professors and explain my situation, but unfortunately my pride got in the way and I thought everything would be okay. How often do we hear that, right? Clearly that was not the result. Shout out to CUNY Edge Advisor who helped. Student knows that we exist, advising, counseling, tutoring, and career services, right? And with more student transparency, they know they can satisfy their probationary requirements. audience. So I kept that because students may have gone through a hurricane. They may have gone through, you know, the edge of despair, and yet they still have the strength. They already had the strengths. Let's keep that in mind. Let's back up. They come with strengths because perhaps they're going through this and working 12-hour shifts overnight at Amazon and doing very well at that job. So let's not think of them as helpless. Let's tap into those, right? And help them see, hey, you did that over there, let's do that over here, right? And these things, these areas. So in summary, barriers to success are often layered. Students' lives include many complex challenges. This is just basic stuff. There are no simple solutions. I wish I could offer you all some. We cannot ignore their circumstances as we consider ways to support their persistence and success. So I know this is more narrative, more qualitative, anecdotal. The reason I don't offer you solutions is because it's now up to us as a community, right? Take my information, take their voices. When you meet with that one student who maybe missed 4 classes when we have a 2 absence policy, perhaps, or whatever it is now, you know, you decide how you will support that student, right? Within the parameters we all have to work with. So that's the presentation. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Dr. Cortes. That was actually very, as someone mentioned in the chat, very insightful. While you think that this is just qualitative and more narrative, this actually informs a lot of the student experience. And these lived experiences are really what matter in order to inform the needs. I think we have a few questions if anyone wants to unmute themselves.
should we start with the folks in the room because they've been so quiet?
Absolutely.
Why do you think, Gabrielle?
Thank you. That was wonderful. Those vivid, you know, those portraits you painted were so wonderful. And I was thinking, you know, as an institution, it's something for us to think about. How do we sort of create that ethos of care, and sort of make that something that's embedded across the college, and you make, you know, all the different sort of parts of the sort of the way students interact with different offices in the college, but also the way they sort of come into our classes and they need care in all of these various places. And maybe we need some kind of systematic approach to that where we can sort of embed that in these various sort of parts of the institution. But I was very touched. It was a really good presentation.
Thank you, and I think you said so many valuable things. And I'm thinking of Claire, Wladis' presentation as well. And like it's about how we show up for them as well, right? And so the implicit bias that she mentioned, it's like the student that comes in your classroom that maybe looks like they don't care. How do we control our own bias to not say that in our own minds and say that student doesn't care? Because you don't know if that student who's nodding off on the Zoom or doesn't want to show their face worked a 12-hour shift last night, right? Or is going through some crazy situation. And so it's like, how do you check yourself before those implicit biases form, right? And also, how do you just create a safe, how do you send the message that this is a safe space, right? Sara talked about safe spaces in the seminars. And like, when I was a student, before I fell on academic probation, one of the challenges was that I didn't feel connected. So I went into classrooms where no students looked like me, 40 deep. I was the only student of color in Geneseo, New York. And I felt like I was invisible. And no one said, yo, Rob, are you okay? Like how, you know, and I would like sit in that corner, literally just like quiet. And I would try to follow what was going on. But like, and these were in subjects I liked. That was like my psychology class. And I just, you know, if a professor would have noticed me, it would have made a world of difference. And eventually I went to Hunter College, and one of my professors, who is a white male, you know, I mean, just because it's not that the person has to look like me, was a white male, actually is responsible for pushing me to get my social work degree at Columbia, right? And get my doctorate eventually. And so like, it's like support comes from anywhere, right? Doesn't matter what you look like, how you sound, if you can make cool references, it's just about being authentic, you know? So thank you for your comment. Gabriella, and your friend in the back. Yes.
Thank you very much. This was very raw and touching. I actually might be guilty of sending students to the counseling center, because when they come to me, you know, occasionally with their issues, many times I don't know how to deal with it. So I would like to know what exactly, and especially during the online situation, how the counseling center, you know, catered to their needs. I mean, I understand that you can't provide housing or this and that, but you know, what, how they got the support that, you know, sort of.
Yeah, wonderful question. And first of all, you're not guilty ever for sending students our way. We are grateful, appreciative of that. And I think during the pandemic, we went above and beyond, like everyone else did, to make our services available. We quickly created protocol and you know, I think my director is on here still, so she can jump in as well. But we created protocol to like do telehealth, right? And counseling sessions over Zooms, which again, it's like a whole, we had to research that to make sure that was like ethical and okay because of confidentiality and make sure the connections were safe and all that. But I think one of the ways is through that, obviously, and also just by putting more content on our online platforms. So on the website, social media, we are very intentional about the type of social media that we put on our counseling center, Instagram, for example. So it's like not just like, you know, your typical like, here's some tips, 7 tips to manage anxiety, but maybe like testimonials, you know, things that speak to what we know students are going through, right? Just trying to send the message that we're here when you're ready. You brought up the point that I said, like, right, we have no easy solutions, right? So our job, or at least I will speak for myself as a counselor, my goal is always just to create a safe space for us to play, right? So we're in a terrible situation. Here's my office, here's my Zoom. It's safe. There's no one here. Let's talk, let's play about what this looks like, feels like for you. And if you could somehow thrive in this mud, you know, because you feel like you're stuck in this mud, what would that look like, right? And if everything else you can't control, what is the one thing that you can do, right? And that's sort of the key. And I think as professors as well, it's the same thing. It's like, look, I know you're going through not all these different things, and I still need you to perform in my class, right? That's the conundrum, that's the challenge. How can I be most effective to you? And if it can't happen this semester, are you aware of academic policies that can help you perhaps, or that you might need to take advantage of? Incomplete option, withdraw at the deadline. You know, again, not that you want to give those options, but because I don't know what the protocol is here from the faculty side of things, but again, it's not about just saying, well, I got to hit you with that F because that's what the policies are, or now I got to hit you with the WU because that, like, it's about trying to understand those things. So I don't know if I answered the question. I hope I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Chirag. I'm a part-time instructor in the science department. Thank you very much for an inspiring talk. This has been a trying semester. I love BMCC for enabling my entrepreneurship and also letting me get back to the community. My question is just about grading. It seems as though it's more of a de facto segregation policy when you talk about granularizing people in a community college with grades and even departments. You know, we create different challenges, and every door they open, it's a different set of rules. And if it's not in writing, they complain about a lot of things being amorphous and not stable enough. So for a stable and durable experience at the community college level, do you think this type of stratification is really serving the mental health and overall cohesiveness of our community?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, it's right, well said. I mean, you almost have the answer in your question, so I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't think anyone could say no, right? And obviously, from a, you know, I can't speak for the institution. That's what Provost Wong is here for. But I agree. I think that change looks like Dr. Rose mentioned, many different levels, right? And so there are things that are on a macro level, meso level, and micro level that we have to sort of change. And I mean, yeah, a lot of it is decentering old school practices, right? And yeah, decentering, yeah, decentering kind of things and looking not just like, okay, let's not just like deconstruct this, but let's also be creative and try to build new ways of evaluating things, new ways of assessing things, right? I'll admit, I used to be the type of researcher that was strictly like empirical, quantitative, you know? I'm like, nope, this has to be asked exactly. I would never use text messages in a presentation if it wasn't like formally done, you know? But my training in the doctoral program over the past years taught me the value in qualitative and like sort of these like messages we're hearing. And that again, this, you know, it's not about finding the truth. It's about understanding how people are perceiving it, right? I could tell you, oh, that's not that hard. As a counselor, I could be like, oh, that doesn't sound that difficult. What do you mean? Like you shouldn't, but if that's absolutely keeping you from getting out of bed in the morning, who am I to judge that, right? I have to, okay, let's start there. Let's start how you're perceiving this. There's no easy answers, right? We can't just say throw out old grading, but again, looking for alternative ways. Some things we talked about in other circles that I'm a part of, like the REI committee, is like, you know, not using, for example, being able to articulate things well in English or write well in English as like the standard, you know, like recognizing that just because somebody is not so proficient in they're writing, that doesn't mean they're any less intelligent than someone who is, right? And so just as an example, maybe there's ways that we can, do more of like less of that and focus on some other things. So
We have one more question. I
Yes.
think John Gallagher, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this is great what we just heard, but I have a kind of a problem. Back when I was in college, Percy Sutton pushed through the state legislature the opportunity programs that we have now, like College Discovery at the junior colleges and Seek at the senior colleges, and those programs were built around a social work model that. And they were built also to attract students who potentially would have a lot of difficulty in college. I was one of them. I mean, I have no problem telling people I was a student who came up through an opportunity program. And the emphasis now and the funding now, like especially from private foundations, and even when you look at the Excelsior Scholarship and stuff like that, is based on a structure on academic advisement, where the students are expected to do a certain load every semester and a certain load per year. And I think what we've just heard in the past couple of presentations kind of contradicts that model that's very popular with people like Bloomberg and the former governor. Can you address that at all, Robert?
Absolutely not, John.
Okay, that's a good answer. Yeah, that's.
I mean, right. If I had some, maybe give me 10 more years, maybe I'll have different connections, right? but I hear you. I mean, I've always advocated for like the idea of looking at the holistic, right? Looking at beyond academics. And I think that's what you're kind of alluding to, right? And like, if you look at a student genuinely from a holistic perspective, then you can't just say, here's 15 credits you need to take, because that might not be, conducive or feasible for that student. So I think you're right in that you have to be able to offer things that might be outside the box. But then the challenge, of course, right, is how do you then standardize that? And that's where it gets tricky, right? And that's beyond my pay grade. So that's where I leave it alone. But I hear you, and I agree with you. I think that we need to, there is no one size fits all. Yet there are some practices that hopefully all of us can create. And that's why I encourage all of you with all these great questions to come up with things. And then when we do these things, we can share like, hey, this worked in my classroom. And then, right? And so when I was in the classroom as an adjunct at another college, my goal was always to use real life examples. So I was teaching psychology, talking about Biggie Smalls and Tupac to my students in Brooklyn, and like using them in kind of, analogies and stuff, because that's what I was into. And that's kind of what they were into, right? And so again, it's just about being creative, I think, as a community. So
well, that's great.
So
I think we're getting on time, and we want to make sure we're mindful. That was a wonderful presentation. I think everyone that presented today was phenomenal. We did a great job of understanding from different perspectives. I think we're going to have to now close out the plenary, and we're going to hand it over to our next moderator for the keynote.
Yes, I think we should take 5 minutes to get ready, and thank you again for this wonderful smorgasbord of different ideas. I always wanted to use that smorgasbord, so I got my chance. And maybe it's time for you to get your coffee, and in 5 minutes we will be back with our very own keynote speaker and an exciting session.